In today's February 4th edition of Saturday Simulcast, we're joined by Mike Carmin, who will be talking about Purdue, Indiana basketball. And then, of course, Tom Dienhart will break down a little bit more on the Purdue football recruiting and what's ahead for Ryan Walters and company. Enjoy the show. Welcome to our Saturday Simulcast with Mike Carmin and talking Purdue basketball. Thank you to the Union Club Hotel, Boiler Up Bar, and 811 Bistro for their support of Gold and Black. Mike, you know, you've been around a lot of Purdue, Indiana games, men's and women's basketball, football. They all seem to get to a crescendo or a boiling point or whatever. But this one, maybe more from the IU perspective, I don't know. But it seems like this one's about as big as it gets, at least from an interest standpoint, as the number one Boilermakers head to Assembly Hall later today, I should say, at 4:00.
Yeah, it does have the feel of a bigger game than what we would normally see because, you know, Purdue being number one in the country, IU had been playing really well up until the loss to Maryland. And as I've said before, I always thought that IU was the only team that could catch Purdue in the Big Ten race because they played them twice and they had a chance to pick up a couple games. But I think Purdue can put that away on Saturday. I think they can, in all intents and purposes, wrap up the Big Ten on Saturday if they win. But there is an extra buzz about it. I think it has to do with Purdue being number one, and IU. Trace Jackson-Davis is playing really well. Saturday is playing well. I mean, that's probably the most fascinating matchup in the country on Saturday. And how much they guard each other remains to be seen because there'll be double teams on both sides, and how that all works out. But to me, that's the most interesting individual matchup that will happen in college basketball coming up on Saturday. So yeah, it'll be the atmosphere will probably be different than it has been a little bit. And last year's atmosphere was great down there, and the same in Mackey Arena. I guess the only difference is that IU doesn't have Robert Finney to
maybe
Purdue.
Good for Purdue.
Haunt Purdue this time, but it'll be another. It should be another great matchup, and it has all the makings of one of the better ones in the rivalry.
Yeah, you look back at it, it's kind of a strange thing because it's certainly, I agree that the number one ranking means a big deal, and it's kind of Indiana would like nothing better in a game that is all about bragging rights. Would like nothing better than to knock Purdue from its perch. Whether it would actually do that, we'll see. But it is certainly that. And Indiana, I think, is safely in the NCAA tournament. It seems at this point, barring a complete meltdown, but it could certainly help its NCAA resume. They're talking maybe about 5 or 6 seed line for the Hoosiers. They could start to really ramp up there, get back in the rankings, the national rankings, but also potentially move that up. I mean, there's a lot to play for, a lot of intrigue from that standpoint. I think you're absolutely right. Trace Jackson-Davis has been so good inside. You're right. It'll be interesting to see. Do you see maybe Caleb First chasing him around for a while? I mean, how do you see Matt Painter and company trying to defend the Hoosiers?
I don't think he'll deviate from what he's done. He'll double him. And whether Zach is the primary defender or Caleb or Mason Gillis, if they're the primary defender, I mean, he's gonna double him. I mean, that has worked. I think he played only 11 minutes last year in the game in Bloomington because he picked up 2 early fouls.
Right.
So Painter's not going to change. And and Matt has said publicly that he's surprised more people don't double him. Now, will they double him every time? It depends where he gets the ball and who's available to double. The question for me is who are you leaving open on the perimeter? Is it going to be Trey Galloway? Is it going to be the freshman point guard who runs hot and cold, which we've seen over the last 2 weeks or so? Who's going to have the opportunity to hit perimeter shots for Indiana? So, and that'll probably change throughout the game. They'll pick and choose and make adjustments that way. But Matt's been pretty open about how they're going to play how they've played Trace Jackson-Davis, and I don't think it will change. There'll be subtle adjustments here and there, but the basic premise is that they're going to double him, get the ball out of his hands, and force other people to beat him.
Familiarity breeds contempt, and both these programs are know what the heck they're going to see on Saturday. There won't be any surprises. I'm with you on that. Jalen Hood-Schifino has really been hot and cold, like you say. He is an NBA-esque guard. I get that at 6'6". Whether Braden Smith checks him directly, or is it Ethan Morton? He is a guy that also, it seems to me, and it's no great analysis here, but really has a lot to do with if Indiana's potential of being really, really good, if he's good. How do you view him in that matchup? It's going to be fascinating. Again, I don't think you see Braden Smith and Fletcher Lawyer, as to use a Gene Katie term, puckering in Assembly Hall, but it is going to be a wild environment for them as well.
Yeah, we've seen too much from the freshmen to even entertain the idea that they won't be ready or they won't hold up. Now, doesn't mean they won't commit turnovers. They're not going to hit every shot. They're not going to make every play, but I don't think the environment's going to rattle them. Purdue has been extremely successful on the road this year, not only on opponent's home floor, but in neutral court setting. So I think they're hardened enough for this. It'll be a much different atmosphere than probably what they've faced in other road games. But you were there at the Cluster. I mean, that place was pretty loud.
Crazy.
It was crazy. So there's even though this team has a lot of young pieces to it, there's a certain level of maturity to how they play. And that has been pretty consistent throughout the year. I don't think it'll change. I don't think that would be the reason Purdue would lose this game. It would lose because it's not hitting shots, or they have some defensive breakdowns, or they're not as effective on the boards as they've been. That would be the reason to lose. I don't think it would have anything to do with any youth or anything like that. They have enough game experience now that they're not freshmen. In my mind, they're juniors. They've skipped their sophomore season. They are juniors right now. That probably makes them eligible for the NBA if they want to go. But I don't think Purdue fans want to do that. But I expect those guys. And Fletcher is. He's got a level of toughness about him, and so does Braden. But Fletcher certainly has a level of toughness about him that comes through just about every game. Nothing bothers those two, and I expect them to hold up very well.
I agreed. I think it's going to be almost a case of I think they relish that. I think they may play better. I mean, they've played arguably in some ways better on the road. And that's not completely true, but you could build a case that they've played pretty well on the road. And yeah, that's what makes it so interesting. Free throw shooting, I know that's a Purdue fans has to find something to be upset about or be concerned about or worried about, to look over your shoulder and what could unravel this team in a close game. Not that it hasn't been all that bad. I mean, Edey's missed a couple. I know Ethan Morton struggled just a shade. Mason Gillis missed his chance to score 30 by missing a free throw. Am I being picky there, or is this just a natural course of where you shoot, or do you have any concern with Purdue's ability at the free throw line?
Well, they bounced back after going 12 of 22, which was a season low. Against Michigan State. They went 10 of 14, and Ethan was 1 of 6, and that bothered him. But it's only a concern when it becomes a concern.
Yeah.
I don't think going into the game that would be high on the concern list for Purdue. They're going to get to the free throw line. Indiana has allowed the most free throw attempts during the Big Ten season of any Big Ten team. Their opponents are getting to the line almost 20 times a game, and anybody that's followed Purdue this year understands they get to the free throw line a lot. They're probably averaging 17 or 18 attempts in Big Ten play. They've had games where they've only went 4 times, and they only went 14 times the other night. But, whether Indiana's fouling a lot or however that's working out, they're allowing opponents to get to the line, and that kind of plays into Purdue's hands a little bit on Saturday. But, yeah, I mean, things like free throw shooting to me are only a problem when they become a problem.
Yeah.
I don't think you go into the game thinking, well, Purdue's going to struggle at the line. Yeah. I just, until they do it, I don't think it's a concern.
Yeah, I think that's a good point, and I think that the Purdue world is trying to find. I mean, it's almost like for Purdue fans, I think it's almost all of this is too good, too much, too good to be true. There just aren't any real flaws right now with this basketball team. I mean, every button that gets pushed seems to work. You know, you've got David Jenkins Jr. coming in and against Michigan State and Michigan and doing good things. You've got just every button it seems to work, and that gives you, if you're a Purdue fan, it has to give you some comfort in a hostile environment that something doesn't go right for somebody early on. They just somebody else comes in and does the job. There's hungry people on the bench that want to play.
Yeah, and I understand. Purdue's fan base is no different than others. I mean, things are going so well that you just expect, okay, the world will end and everything will come crashing down at one point. And I would just say, Purdue may lose this game Saturday, but it really doesn't change a whole lot. Now, if they do lose, it's more of how they lost. Was it self-inflicted, or did you just run into a hot team? Hot shooting team. There's going to be a game left on this during the regular season where Purdue faces that. It just happens. College basketball is too close together to think that Purdue's not going to get challenged and they're not going to run into a hot team. They got IU on the road, they got Maryland on the road. Northwestern's kind of come back down to earth, but you still got to go to Wisconsin. You've got there's a lot of tough games left where they're going to run into somebody that's going to push them to the limit and make the plays that Purdue has been making. But I don't think a loss Saturday really changes a whole lot for Purdue. It doesn't change the fact that they're probably going to win the Big Ten. It won't change the fact that they're going to be a number one seed. Now, where they end up on that line, and I don't think one loss in early February would change a whole lot of that right now. But fans are fans, and if it's too good, then you have to worry about something. So but I would just go back and say, hey, if your life's going well, then just enjoy it.
Yeah.
And if adversity strikes, then you'll deal with it.
Yeah. Houston last night struggled for a lot of that game against Wichita State. I mean, it's just, and yet pulled it out. If you're looking at right. Alabama and Houston right now is maybe the two teams that are maybe the biggest challenges to Purdue at the top. I'm not talking about for the Final Four just yet. I'm just saying it's everywhere. I mean, it's just you're going to lose games, and we keep saying that, and Purdue keeps winning them. But I think that is a true statement, and especially against there's a lot of motivation in Bloomington. Obviously, there's a lot of motivation for Purdue as well, and I think that part is going to be an interesting thing to watch. All right, any last question? Any matchups or any folks that you really want to keep an eye on tomorrow or later today? I should say when is it Race Thompson and Mason Gillis again? What is a matchup that you think that we may not be thinking about that's going to be really interesting from your perspective?
Well, beyond the obvious, Edey and Jackson Davis.
Yeah.
And, as I mentioned, not how much they actually guard each other still remains to be seen. But you brought it up earlier. Who checks Hood Schifino?
Yeah.
Morton's in a. I told him. I said, "Are you in a defensive groove?" He really had not thought about that and really didn't understand what it meant because he's been focused on his offense a little bit. But I'd like to see him defend the point guard because he has the size, he has the athleticism to keep up with him. He can challenge his shots. But the way Purdue plays defense and they switch so much, everybody's going to get a shot to do it. But that would be, to me, a really good matchup to watch. And, there are intriguing matchups across the board and with, as you mentioned, Race and Mason and Race and Taylor First and so on and so forth. I mean, it's, Purdue's going to have probably a little bit more depth coming off the bench than Indiana in this case. And the way this Purdue has played defense, it doesn't really, you just don't put one guy on one guy and keep him there. And all those guys have bought in, they're well connected. This is a much better defensive team than a year ago. It shows. I think a lot of it is they care and they understand what's ahead of them. But there'll be times where Braden Smith is caught on Hood Schifino and Fletcher's on him, and they're going to have, IU's going to have to recognize the mismatch opportunities. But at the same time, Purdue is going to Purdue's going to have to recognize that as well. I think one area Purdue probably could exploit is Indiana's transition defense. They were not very good against Maryland.
No.
And if they can, the last year when Jay Navy got the ball, it became the point guard because he got so many defensive rebounds. And I think Braden Smith kind of fills that role as well. He rebounds so well that he can start that fast break without passing the ball. And I think if Purdue pushes the ball, because they've been so good on the defensive boards, if they can push the ball, I think they can get some easy points and find those extra points that Painter talks about a lot of time outside of the normal offense.
Yeah, good point. And I think that is, I know Rob Hummel, listening to him talking or doing the analyzing of the Maryland-Indiana game, really talked time and again about the Hoosiers' challenge in transition defense at times. And of course, Maryland's pretty good in that environment as well, but well put. All right, we appreciate your coverage. We look forward to all of it after today's game as Purdue takes on Indiana, 4:00, and a game that will be on ESPN. And we'll look forward to all of that and more as we get through going to be, you got the fire at Indiana, and then you got Iowa coming home at the end of the week. It's in the Big Ten. At least they're not like Northwestern where the Boilermakers are playing like 5 games in 11 days. That's been a good thing for Purdue. The schedule is still relatively well spaced out. That, I think, is an advantage for some teams, and it's going to be maybe a little bit. Purdue should be relatively rested, even on Saturday today against Bloomington, but also by the time Iowa comes to town. Mike, thanks again. We will be back. We won't be back. We're going to transition, I should say, to Tom Dienhart, talk a little bit about Purdue football and a little bit about Ryan Walters' recruiting class. It's a thing that Mike Carmin knows a little bit about as well. But we'll hit that, and maybe even Ryan Walters' new contract, too. We'll hit that, too. So thanks again, Mike, and we'll be back in a couple seconds as you'll hear from Tom Dienhart shortly. Tom, Ryan Walters on Wednesday met the media and talked about his recruiting class in about a 20-minute press conference. I want to get your initial impressions. We haven't had a chance to really be around him in a public setting since he was announced. Mm-hmm. And I wanted to get what you thought with respect to, how he handled himself in the press conference, and also maybe a little bit about that recruiting class that he brought in for 2023.
Yeah, I thought he handled himself well, Alan. Like you said, we haven't seen him much in a public setting after the press conference on December 13th. He's good in front of an audience. He always seems at ease, Alan. And just it's not like he's delivering a speech. He's got a casualness about him. Yeah. A conversational style. How about that?
Yeah.
Even when he's sitting on the dais or at a press conference. So again, I think he handles himself well. And as far as the recruiting class goes, I think Purdue did as well as you could expect given the circumstances, right? I mean, he comes in officially hired December 13th. Already a bunch of players were committed that didn't commit to him, right? Sure, there was some attrition. That was to be expected, but he ended up signing, I think, 12 guys in December. And he wouldn't finish there, Alan. Even though there was a small window from that December signing period to February 1st, basically a month, right? Still went out there and tried to find more 2023 guys while he was also recruiting for 2024. And you get the sense they seem pretty pleased with the guys they were able to get in the 2023 class, Alan. 4 high school kids overall. They wanted guys who were almost multiple position guys, and they got 3 in particular that fit that bill. The Ahmad Branch kid from Missouri, Derek Rogers from Florida, and Mondrell Dean from West Virginia are guys that kind of just athletes now. They're going to try to figure out which side of the ball they're going to play on in the future. And they signed a junior college offensive tackle. I think they're pleased with him, Alan. I think he's obviously going to slide right into the depth chart, maybe be the 4th tackle at this point. And I think of note too, Alan, they got George Byrne, right? The kid who committed to Jeff Brom way back in July, tight end from Mount Vernon, Indiana. He didn't sign in December, Alan. Yeah. He was going to wait and see what was going to happen. And Purdue, and Ryan Walters talked about this on Wednesday. He had to go back and resell this kid, and he convinced them to re-up with Purdue, and he signed on Wednesday. So a big 6'5", about 215-pound tight end, is a great track athlete. So he's coming aboard as well. So those are sort of the prep guys they got. And obviously, don't forget about the transfer from Stanford, Salim Turner Muhammad, a kid who's got at least 2 years of eligibility, Alan. Smart kid, big buddy of Sanusi Canes. They kind of grew up and trained together out in New York. And I suspect he's going to come in and probably start right away at cornerback. So I think they did a good job bringing in some of these guys late to really augment the 12 that they signed way back in December.
You know, you have that opportunity, and it is such a moving target. Not many guys not many Stanford transfers anywhere. And when you get a guy that has been out there, and he also talked about obviously Hudson Card and the fact that was important to set the tone to get that quarterback. He called him the best quarterback in the transfer portal, but that certainly got some people's attention that you were able to get him secured and had some effect with the rest of that class, but also for that 2024 group, just because it tells you you mean business, so to speak.
Yeah, they sort of took yesterday as a chance to, I guess, formally announce those 4 other transfers.
Yeah,
that came aboard in, I guess, January. Hudson Card came in December, but the other guys came in January. The 2 kids from Arkansas, the safety Anthony Brown, the defensive end Isaiah Nichols, and they got the interior offensive lineman from Bowling Green, Jalen Grant. So they kind of formally announced those guys yesterday too. They said they had a 10-man class where 5 were transfers and 5 were high school kids. So, yeah, Hudson Card, you're right. Coach Walters talked about Hudson Card on Wednesday. His first real public comments on Hudson Card, as you noted. So, everything you hear about the kid, he's certainly talented. He's going to be a dual threat guy. Has some starting experience in Austin, Texas, played on a big stage, obviously. He's not going to shy away from the spotlight. And a guy you got to think, Alan, they're going to try to build this offense around. So we'll get our first look at Hudson Card this spring. And again, guys, to remember, spring practice probably going to start the week of March 20th, the week after Purdue spring break is what it's looking like right now. So a little later than usual. So not sure what type of access we're going to get or the public will get. Hopefully we'll get wide open access, but that's TBD. But anyway, Hudson Card, yes, that was Ryan Walters' first order of business. I think the moment he got the job, one of the first things he did, Alan, I know one of the first things he did was get on a plane and go see Hudson Card.
Yeah. Infrastructure, organization, all of those storylines. He's making kind of assembling his team, not just the assistant coaching staff, but everything else that's around the program, strength coach, medical staff, et cetera, things that he would like to control, so to speak. How do you assess that situation? Of course, new strength coach coming in as well. Yeah, that's a big part of what Ryan Walters wants to be a part of.
Yeah, Kiro Small. I spoke to him this week. We met over at the Kozich Performance Complex. He walked me around. I interviewed him. I'll have a story on him in a week or so, but a great guy, Alan. Call him Coach Rowe, he said. I'm Coach Rowe.
Yeah.
He's about 5'8", maybe.
Yeah.
5'9". He's a brutal fullback at Arkansas. And he's got clips on YouTube. Somebody posted them on our message board. If you want to see him in action, they threw him the ball. They show him blasting guys backwards and carrying the ball, kind of a bowling ball. And then he was drafted by the Seahawks. He played in the NFL for a little bit with the Cleveland Browns, with the Ravens. So anyway, just a great personality. I think a guy that the players are going to like to work with. I talked to Eric Miller today too, Alan, the offensive tackle for Purdue, to get his perspective on Coach Small, what it's been like working with him, et cetera, et cetera. So again, as you can imagine, they've all enjoyed it so far. They're working out about 5 days a week right now. And I know when I talked to Coach Walters in Florida during the bowl game, he said he wanted a good 8 weeks of strength and conditioning before they got to spring football. And that's sort of where the team's at right now, is training, getting their bodies in shape, And Alan, they're also starting to do some install too of the offense and defense, dribs and drabs here. So they'll be able to hit the ground running when spring ball does kick off here in about a month and a half or so. So they got full wheels going right now, as you can imagine. The good news for Coach Walters and the staff is they're finally off the road, Alan.
Yeah.
Anybody who's been following on social media knows they've been out and about across America offering 2024 recruits. Now we've entered what's called, I think, a quiet period right now. So everybody's off the road. The guys are back in the building, and now they can sort of get to know the personnel a little bit more. Coach Walters even talked about that now, where now he's back more anchored in West Lafayette, can connect even more with his new players.
Yeah, it's certainly he was made that clear on Wednesday that he was looking forward to being a coach, being the coaching part of it, not just the recruiting side of it. And it was very, very clear that he's looking forward to installing what he's about, working with his staff and trying to put together not only a program, but an identity. I think both offensive and defensively, all coaches want to do that from the get-go. All right, one other thing that'll be happening Friday, probably around the time of this show, is contractual stuff. We don't know all the things we'd understood. We'll see if our sources were correct that Ryan Walters was going to be at about a $4 million a year contract with some escalators. Whether you'll get all that information today as you head to the Board of Trustees meeting, but interesting from that standpoint in terms of getting that done, getting that announced. It kind of lays the table, sets the table of what's out there. It's not, these guys are how much you get in terms of assistant coaches' salaries, I don't know, but it is an interesting part of this entire thing. We understand also that Ryan Walters put a lot of money in that assistant coach pool, almost $5.5–6 million. So again, all things that's going to take to be able to operate this program at the level that Purdue hopes it will be to be competitive in the Big Ten.
Yeah, you're right. Board of Trustees meeting Friday morning. A lot on their agenda. Yeah. What interests us, again, is the compensation committee, Alan.
Yeah.
That's who's going to, I guess, rubber stamp this contract for Ryan Walters. And, yeah, we'll hopefully expect, I guess, to get at least a look at that deal in some way, shape, or form, to get some general parameters. Hopefully we can report something on what that deal looks like. And like you said, probably a $4 million range for Ryan Walters would seem like a compensation for a first-time head coach. Salary pool will be interesting, Alan. Again, you're only as good as the people around you, right?
Yeah.
What difference does it make if you make a fortune and the people around you, aren't compensated well and can't help you do your job? I mean, sometimes you're better off. You see these quarterbacks in the NFL take less money so the team can spend money on players to surround them with.
Yeah.
I'm a guy, Alan, that, not to get off on a tangent, but I want good people around me. I'll take $2 million. Let's get a good staff. Let's get everything in place so we can all succeed. Doesn't do any good. $2 million is enough money, right?
Yeah.
Anyway, I digress. So we'll find out some compensation. The assistant coaches, Alan, I'm told right now, are working with at-will. They're at-will employees, how it's been described to me. I don't think contracts have been signed yet for the assistant coaches, so we don't know what their salaries are at this point. So, yeah, that's out there too. Just kind of fun minutia and detail, I think. I always like to find out about, and I'm sure a lot of the viewers enjoy that kind of stuff too.
It's the off season. It's the time to do that stuff. And you're right. Now the norm in assistant coach contracts anymore is at least a couple of years. It didn't used to be that way.
Yeah.
It tends to be that way now. And that will be
that's going to be 2-year deals, Alan. And just keep this in mind too. I think a lot of what's going on here to bring this program to a higher level from a structure standpoint is being driven by Tiffany Grimes.
Yeah.
Who's obviously been on the job about, what, Alan, 6 months or so?
Yeah, if that, yeah.
Fort Wayne native, a Purdue graduate who really cut her teeth working at Alabama for the last 6 years before returning to her alma mater. And I think, she came up here for a reason. And I think we're seeing her fingerprints on a lot of what's going to be going on to make this a top-notch football program.
No doubt. She was integrally involved in the hiring of Ryan Walters. We talked about last week with the guest Mike Berghoff talking about the three that were in the interview room with Mike Babinski, Tiffany Grimes, Mike Berghoff, when they interviewed Ryan Walters at the Mount Comfort Airport when that all went down back in December. So always good stuff, Tom. We appreciate everything. Lots of recruiting on the site as well. And it's never a dull moment, as they say in college football, and it will be that way even in February or in March. Obviously, let's talk about it.
One last real quick note. I mean, this is going to be airing on Friday, but Thursday night we will have had Aiden O'Connell in the Shrine Bowl. Yeah. Saturday we got a couple guys in the Senior Bowl. Purdue does. Payne Durham and Corey Trice. And look forward in February, Alan, 4 Boilermakers going to be in the NFL Combine. So a lot of Boilermakers looking to take that leap to the next level here. It's going to be kind of fun for fans to watch that as well the next month or so.
Yeah, guys that we've been watching for a long time in West Lafayette. It'll be really good to see how they fare. All right, we'll take a short break. Be back with Chad Brown, who will talk about winning and wellness, something that Tom and I probably could stand to know more about that. And really interesting because he's worked a lot with Matt Painter about behavior and trying to get to know your players and your kids that you're in your program and how they mess with coaches, etc. Be very interesting to hear what Chad has to say. So stay tuned. We'll be back in 2 minutes on Gold and Black Live. Thanks so much, Tom. And also want to thank Mike Carmin and all of you for watching and listening Saturday Simulcast. I also want to thank all of you for all the well wishes for Brian Newbert, who had successful surgery last week and has a road ahead to be sure, but we appreciate all the love and support that we've heard. I want to thank the Union Club Hotel too for its sponsorship, the Boiler Up Bar, 811 Bistro. We appreciate you. So have a great week, everybody. We'll be back next week. I think Tom Dienhart and Mike Carmin will host next week's Saturday Simulcast, but it should be fun. So thanks again for watching, listening, and as Brian Newbert always says, how you process your information on Gold and Black. Thanks so much.